Hello, fellow Toastmasters. I'm Ace Gayhart, District 10 Finance Manager. Thank you for joining us tonight as we present what is now the second, and we hope to be a series of educational presentations. Tonight's presentations is Speech Contest Judges Training. Our presenter for tonight is District 10 Program Quality Director, Vicki Nan. This will be an interactive session. Feel free to use the Q&A tool or use the chat tool, and I'll be here to send your questions to Vicki. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. With that, let's all welcome Vicki, and Vicki, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Ace, and welcome to all our fellow Toastmasters who are participating in this webinar this evening. Today we're going to be doing an overview of important information for people who plan to serve as Toastmasters contest judges. Ace, are you able to poll our attendees? I'd like to know how many people in our audience today have ever served as a Toastmasters contest judge.
Sure thing, Vicki. So everyone should have a polling screen, and if you could, go ahead and select yes or no, and we'll give everybody about 20 more seconds. I see everybody is fast on the computer, which is a wonderful thing.
And I also want to mention, I think it's great that everybody's come to training this evening. This will be recorded, so if you have fellow Toastmasters who would like to listen to this recording, I do want to mention that judges training is not mandatory. Last week, in the course of a span of 24 hours, 3 different Toastmasters asked me if training was required. It's not required. However, we do want our judges to understand the Toastmasters judging criteria. We want them to be fair when they judge contestants. We want our contests to be well run, and training can help put those dedicated Toastmasters in the best position to be fair, to be knowledgeable, and to help our contestants enjoy the event the way it was intended. So how is that poll going, Ace?
Thank you for everybody who weighed in. Out of the 12 people that answered, about 3/4 of you, or 8, said yes, you served as a Toastmasters contest judge. The remaining people either said no or did not answer.
All right, thank you. So this presentation comes to us from Toastmasters International. I did splice in a few slides of my own based on over 10 years of my own Toastmasters contest judging experience. The purpose of speech contest, there are 3 purposes of speech contests from the perspective of World Headquarters, and one is to provide an opportunity to practice competitive speaking, and that means that we as Toastmasters have this opportunity to stand up in front of the audience and to make a speech, compete against other people, and maybe win and advance. So we get to practice our competitive speaking skills. Another purpose of a speech contest is to provide an interesting educational program. By the way, our contests should be open to the public. You can invite outsiders, friends, family, other people, complete strangers to your club and area, division, and the district contest. So it's wonderful to bring outsiders in to show them this aspect of our Toastmasters education programs. And another purpose of speech contests is to provide an opportunity to learn by observing really, really excellent speakers. You'll pick up tips when you go to speech contests, and I would encourage all of you to attend speech contests throughout the district. You can visit neighboring districts, watch other clubs and areas and divisions hold their speech contests, and see the skills of other speakers, and you'll pick up some skills yourself. We're going to talk now about the obligations that judges have. Judges clearly have an obligation to contestants. We want to be fair to our contestants. We want to judge them fairly and as objectively as possible. We also have an obligation to Toastmasters International. After all, we're conducting these contests within the context of our organization. There is a rule book that Toastmasters International has honed over many, many years, and we are obligated as judges to understand the standards that Toastmasters International is holding us to. We have an obligation to our audience to keep our contest entertaining and fair. And I can see my slides are advancing themselves. Judges have an obligation to themselves as well. You want to be trained, you want to be knowledgeable, you want to make sure that you know what it takes to be an objective judge in a contest. By the way, if you have any questions, please do put them in a chat to Ace, and he'll let me know about them. Now, to be a judge, you need to be eligible. Not just anybody can serve as a Toastmasters contest judge. At the club level, you simply have to be a paid member. Okay, at the club level, you simply have to be a paid member. There's no other requirement. Have your dues paid and you are eligible to be a judge. Of course, you cannot be a contestant in a contest that you're judging. Now, once you go beyond the club and you go to the area, division, or district contest, the requirements are a little bit higher. You have to be a paid member for at least 6 months. So you can't be a brand new Toastmaster. You have to have at least 6 months of membership under your belt to be a judge at an area, division, or district contest. And you also have to have completed at least 6 speeches from our Competent Communication Manual. So make sure, if you serve as the chief judge in a contest, you will want to verify the eligibility of your judges as well. Make sure that if it's an area, division, or district contest, they meet these 3 requirements. Now, once Pathways rolls out, which in District 10 won't be until, well, we're looking at sometime in November most likely, there are also Pathways requirements for judges if you are in the Pathways program. And that'll come into play next spring for our spring contests. And then finally, you have to be physically present at the contest where you're judging. That means you can't join via Skype or by another teleconferencing medium or by phone. You have to be physically present. So those are the requirements to be a judge. And by the way, if you want a copy of these slides, you're welcome to email me after the presentation. I will email you the slides if you request them. My email address is programquality@district10.org, programquality@district10.org. Now, there is a difference between judging and evaluating. We judge at contests. We evaluate prepared speeches at our club meetings. And there's a big difference. Judging means you're picking a winner. You are not providing feedback. And this can become important because sometimes after contests, contestants for one reason or another want feedback. They'll walk up to somebody they figured out is a judge and might say things like, oh, I won, I'm advancing to the next level. Can you help me figure out what I need to do to be better at the next level? Or there can be cases of a disgruntled contestant. And I've witnessed this, where a disgruntled contestant comes up and demands to know why he placed where he placed. And that's not what your purpose is. Your purpose is to judge, not to evaluate, not to provide feedback. When we evaluate at our club meetings, for example, we give an appraisal, we provide we provide advice, we make suggestions. One thing that you can do if a contestant comes up to you after a contest and wants some feedback is you can tell that contestant, go to your home club or go to another club and make that same speech, but make it as a prepared speech and ask for example, a round robin evaluation where everyone in the room has a minute or 2 to provide feedback. You go around the table. But at a contest, and even after the contest, you are not allowed to talk about how you evaluated, because you're not evaluating. You're not allowed to talk about how you judged that contestant, how you came up with the rankings you did. That's nobody's business because judges' decisions are confidential. All right, so as a judge, you are not at liberty to discuss why you rated the contestants the way you did. Now, good judges are accurate, they're fair, trustworthy, knowledgeable, and they're good listeners. Accurate means that when you fill out your forms, you fill them out correctly, and you will take a look at a ballot here in a few minutes. You absolutely positively need to be fair, and we'll talk more about what it takes to be as objective as possible. You need to be trustworthy. So what you see in a contest stays in that contest. You don't discuss it outside the contest. And you need to be knowledgeable. You need to know, you need to understand the judging criteria for that particular contest. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. And you also have to be a very good listener. In District 10, you may be in a contest situation where you're judging 8 contestants. You really need to be listening carefully and probably taking notes so that you can keep those contestants separate and judge them fairly. When I was in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, I judged one of the semifinals in the one of the semifinals in the International Speech Contest. There were 10 contestants. In some of the semifinals, there were 11 contestants. And you know, that gets really interesting when you're judging that many contestants. But even if you're judging only 3 or 4, you really need to be focused and be a good listener. Now, being objective is really, really important. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here now on talking about things that stand in the way of your being an objective judge. One of the things is the speaker position, and this means whether somebody's the first speaker or the last speaker or somewhere in the middle. If you've ever been a contestant, if you've ever been a chief judge, you know that the contestants draw for speaking order. Oh boy, that speaker who draws number 1, doesn't that person's face typically fall? And that's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of I think it's a part of our culture that the earlier speaker feels that he's like the warm-up act, right? Like at a comedy club or at a concert, that opening act isn't the one that everybody's paid to come and see. Of course, it's not the way it is at a Toastmasters contest. That first speaker is just as likely to win as the last speaker when viewed objectively. But sometimes speaker position can bias a judge. They tend to feel warmer toward the later speakers. So that's something you as a judge will need to work against. So try to judge, you need to work really hard to judge your first contestant as objectively as the last contestant. Another bias that some people have is to favor the underdog. So you watch the speakers, you're taking your notes, you're listening, you're looking with an eye towards your judging criteria, but oh, that poor speaker, he's trying so hard, and oh, maybe you know something about his background, and you know he's been trying for a long time to win, and so you vote for him. But that's not what you should be doing. You should not be looking for the underdog. You should be looking for the best speaker in that contest. So just because you feel sorry for somebody, that's not a reason to vote for him. The halo effect is when a speaker's aura or the glow of that speaker kind of rubs off on a subsequent speaker. So you might be feeling all warm and fuzzy. Maybe you've laughed a lot for speaker number 3, and now here comes speaker number 4, and you just transfer those warm, fuzzy feelings to speaker number 4. That could be an example of the halo effect, but that's not fair. You want to judge each speaker independent of the others. You need to look at each speaker as objectively as possible, and while you will compare them, because you have to, I mean, you have to rank order them, you shouldn't let one person's performance color another person's performance unfairly. There can also be a reverse halo effect. So let's say speaker number 3 really rubbed you the wrong way. Now you're in a bad mood, you're grumpy, you thought you were going to be entertained and you just didn't like that speech. Now here comes the next speaker and you're still grumpy and you're going to hold it against the next speaker. Well, I know nobody in this audience would ever do that, but it's a risk, and this particular slide does come to us from Toastmasters International. I'm sure they've seen this. So that's just something you want to be aware of. Second time around, third time around, fourth time around, you may know of some speakers who have been trying for years to make it to that international stage, to have a shot at being the world champion of public speaking. And you may feel sorry for him, and you may want to give him a little extra boost because you know about his background. That's not being objective. You need to forget about that. And that's a challenge, but you have to forget about it and judge that speaker for how he or she is presenting that very day, that particular speech. Now, sometimes the speech is really out of the ordinary. There's a rumor that the international speech in particular is supposed to be a motivational speech or an inspirational speech. That is actually not true. That's just a rumor. In fact, when I was part of the judges briefing in Vancouver for the semifinal that I would be judging, the person doing the briefing told us this, that don't look for inspirational speeches. That's not what, now people might think it's the norm, but that's not the norm. A very good, a winning international speech doesn't have to be inspirational, doesn't have to be motivational. Now, of course, if you're judging a humorous speech in a humorous speech contest, well, you are looking for a humor. You're looking for it to make you laugh. But keep in mind, for some of our speech contests, they can cover any topic and be funny or be touching or not, or be instructional, informational. It doesn't matter. So just don't rule out something or rule something in because it's not the norm. And also, you really want to work hard at leaving your prejudices and personal preferences at home. When you see a speaker, you need to forget about the things that maybe prejudices you grew up with. Maybe there's an accent, for example, that you love, and you may have a tendency to rate that speaker higher because you love that accent, or maybe there's an accent you don't like. You need to clear your mind of those things and focus on the speech and the speech criteria. We want to be as objective as possible. You need to know the rules. By knowing the rules, you'll prevent misconceptions, and to do that, you need to read the rulebook. I ask, and actually I should say I demand, that every chief judge, every voting judge, every contestant, every ballot counter, every timer read the rulebook. This is this year's rulebook. This young man on the cover is Darren Tay, and he was the world champion of public speaking a year ago. And I don't know why my slides are advancing. They shouldn't be, so I apologize for that. But read the rulebook. You can download it for free, and you just have to Google Toastmasters rulebook. It'll pop right up. And you will also have a hard copy of it in your speech contest kit at the area, division, or district level. So read the rulebook. There are some misconceptions floating around that I think from old versions of the rulebook. Make sure you read the current rulebook. One misconception is how much time judges have after the last contestant to mark their ballot. They have as much time as they need, and there should be no time limit announced. The contest master should simply announce, judges, can we have silence until all the ballots are collected? So you want to prevent misconceptions by understanding the rules in the current rulebook. This next slide shows us the judge's guide and ballot for the humorous speech contest. And here in District 10, this time around, we're having the humorous speech and table topics contest. So this is a two-sided ballot, or two-sided form, really. And the front page has the guide and the ballot. And you'll see there's a dotted line horizontally about 3/4 of the way down. That's where you're going to fold this ballot back and forth, and you're going to tear off the lower part when it's time to collect the ballots. So we're going to take a few minutes to look at this ballot here. First thing I want to point out to you is you see that there are columns 1 through 10. That's where you're going to put the names of the contestants in the speaking order that's announced. However, I suggest you do it in reverse. In other words, when the contest master says, we're now going to announce the speaking order, you're going to write down the name of contestant number 1 in the space above column number 10. And you're going to write contestant number 2's name in the space above number 9 or number 8, depending on how many contestants you have. If you have fewer than say, I don't know, 8 contestants, you can skip well, if you have fewer than 5 contestants, you can certainly skip a line in between each of those columns where you're going to put your ratings for the contestants. So what you'll do then is, if you put over number 10 the name of contestant number 1, you're going to fold the page and like an accordion. You're ultimately going to have sort of an accordion folded page so that you can hide from yourself your ratings for that first contestant. You're just going to tuck that under, and then you're going to observe contestant number 2 and rate him in the minute between contestants, and then you're going to fold it under again. Now, you don't have to do that. That's just a suggestion someone made to me a long time ago, but I found it pretty helpful. Obviously, if you've got 10 contestants, you're going to have to fold along the lines if you do that. Now let's take a look on the left side where it says judging items. And if you look down that left side, you'll see several criteria: speech development, effectiveness, speech value, and so on. You'll notice just to the right of that there are these are grouped into 3 areas. So for example, the first area is content. And for the humorous speech, content is worth 55 out of 100 points. So it's worth a little more than half of the total points that are available. Content is very important in the humorous speech contest. If you look down, delivery gets 30 points possible, and that comprises physical, voice, and manner. And then language is worth 15 points of the total 100 points, and that is appropriateness, the appropriateness of the topic, and correctness. How did this person use language? Now, you look to the right of that, and you see at the top it says suggested point values. You can certainly follow this, and these criteria, by the way, are described on the back side of the paper, you know, in the right image on this slide. You can certainly use these point values. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. In fact, many judges, especially new judges, adhere to this suggested point value very carefully. And then when it comes time for them to complete their ballot, they're doing a lot of math. They're counting on their fingers and toes, and I've even seen people pull out calculators to do the math. These are suggested point values. You don't have to use you have to use these criteria, but you don't have to use this numerical system. So for example, you might want to judge your contestants with an A through F scale, like in school. A, B, C, D, and F. You might want to use a series of pluses and minuses. You listen to somebody, oh, that was good, you give them a plus. The next person comes and you like his content better, you give him 2 pluses. You might give people minuses. You can use a scale of 1 to 5. You can use whatever scale works for you, because it's your opinion of these contestants. And Toastmasters International doesn't care. Nobody should ever, ever, ever see the top part of your ballot. And remember I said you're going to tear it off along that dotted line? You're going to destroy the top part of your ballot when the contest is over. Don't let anybody see it. Do not throw it out in the contest venue anywhere. Not in the restroom, not in the parking lot. Don't throw it out there. Take it home and shred it. Let's see, what else we want to say here. Down below in the judge's official ballot section, that's where you're going to rank your choices for first, second, and third. Now, if you're the tiebreaker judge, and you will know if you're the tiebreaker judge, your chief judge will tell you you are, you're going to rank all the contestants. If there's 7, you're going to rank 7. If there's 5, you're going to rank 5. But if you're a voting judge, you're going to rank only the top 3. You must sign your name and you must print your name. And if you don't, your ballot will be discarded. It won't be counted. So make sure you do that. A lot of times chief judges, when they're doing their briefings before the contest, will tell you, go ahead and sign your name and print your name right now. And at that point, you might also want to start to tear off your ballot so that it doesn't make a loud tearing sound during the contest. Don't tear it off completely. Just tear it off maybe to an inch within the edge of the paper. That's just a suggestion to you. You can do whatever works for you, but make sure you pick your top 3 if there are 3 contestants or more in the contest, and you must break your own ties. So sometimes judges will look at the bottom total score and they'll say, oh no, I've got 2 people with 87s, what do I do now? Well, that's where the notes you took will come in handy, and having been a good listener, you need to break your own ties. If you take a look at the image to the right where it says judging criteria, that's where you've got descriptions of the criteria. I strongly recommend that you download copies of the humorous speech contest ballot and the table topics ballot if you're judging in District 10 this time around, and review this before you go into the contest. You also need to adhere to the Judges Code of Ethics, which is at the bottom. And you will sign a statement of your eligibility to be a judge for your chief judge prior to the start of the contest. Are there any questions about this particular ballot?
Hi, Vicki. No questions so far, but as a reminder, feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section.
Great. Thank you, Ace. Now, these are some tips for helping you through the contest. You want to take notes. What I'll do is I'll note something unusual about the contestants. So one of the contestants in the semifinal round, one of the semifinals that I watched, came running out with a bride's veil on his head. And he talked a lot about France, so I put that in my notes. You can write in your notes whatever you think will make that contestant memorable for you, so that when you go back to judge, to actually fill out your ballot, you can keep them separate and you can rank order them. You can use those points that are on the ballot, but you don't have to. Like I said, you can use other point values. You can use an A, B, C, D, F scheme. You can use a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scheme. You can use pluses and minuses. You can use whatever you like. Now, this is a slide that I inserted here. There are different types of judges at our Toastmasters contest. One judge, there will be only one of these at a contest, is the chief judge. Now, the chief judge is not a voting judge. The chief judge manages the voting judges, the tiebreaker judge, the ballot counters, and the timers. And according to Toastmasters International, the chief judge gets to select that team. Now, sometimes I know that some of our clubs and our areas and divisions do it a little differently. The contest chair may manage the selection of the helpers. If that's okay with the chief judge, that's fine, but it really is the chief judge's responsibility to select his or her team. The sergeant-at-arms, that's not stated in the rule book. The chief judge can select the sergeant-at-arms, the contest master can, but really the chief judge is the one who pulls together this team of helpers. And the chief judge does not vote. Make sure, if you ever serve as a chief judge, and I do hope you do, it's a really, really good experience. You learn a lot. You don't vote. Make sure you have enough judges who are eligible to serve and who will vote. Now, the voting judges are the people who take the ballots and they vote on the contestants. They cast their ballots and they should remain anonymous. Now, the idea behind this, the way it was explained to me was, we want our judges to be anonymous for their own protection. Believe it or not, sometimes after a contest, there are some contestants who are really upset. And some of them have been known, I experienced this just last spring, in fact, some of them have been known to go right up to judges and get in their faces and angrily demand to know why they placed where they did. So if you can remain as anonymous as possible, that's less likely to happen. Now, most of our contestants are wonderful and just they accept the results and they don't fret about it. Now, do know that the contestants can ask the chief judge for their time. That is perfectly allowed. That is not forbidden. But they can't ask you as a judge, well, why'd you rate me the way you did? If they don't know that you're a judge, that's not going to happen. So you should try to remain as anonymous as possible. I don't recommend waving your ballot up in the air. I recommend making eye contact with the ballot counters who will collect the ballot when you make eye contact. They should also be present in the briefing ahead of time so that they can see who the judges are. We want our judges to keep a low profile. This also means as a voting judge, it's kind of a thankless job in that you're not going to be thanked openly in front of the group. You're not going to be asked to stand up and wave. It's not part of that role. The chief judge, on the other hand, is a known contributor. The chief judge's name is typically in our District 10 program, and the chief judge is acknowledged. The chief judge doesn't vote. That's the big difference. Now, we do also have a tiebreaker judge. The tiebreaker judge may or may not wind up voting. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the tiebreaker judge does complete a ballot, and as I mentioned earlier, the tiebreaker judge ranks all the contestants. The thing is, if there isn't a tie, the tiebreaker's ballot will not even be looked at. So if you're the chief judge, you're a ballot counter, if there's no tie, you won't even open the you will never even open the the tiebreaker judge's ballot. You won't even look at it. Now, if there is a tie, that's when the chief judge will consult the tiebreaker judge's ballot, but only in the event of a tie. The tiebreaker judge is, he completes a special ballot, and the tiebreaker judge does not participate in the briefings prior to the contest. So if you are the chief judge of the contest, you'll want to pick a tiebreaker judge who is an experienced judge, who doesn't need to be briefed or can manage being briefed separately. The tiebreaker judge is known only to the chief judge. The chief judge collects the tiebreaker judge's ballot. Nobody's supposed to know who the tiebreaker judge is. And you can understand why. If there is a tie, which is generally not made known to the audience, but that one person can determine the outcome of the contest. All right, so those are the types of judges that we have in our contests. ACE and audience members, that concludes my judges training portion of the program. If you have questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vicki. No questions so far, but since it is open to questions, please, feel free to put in your comments, your chats, use the Q&A for questions. Know that we are recording this, and we plan to post it to the District 10 website.
That'd be great. So, Ace, one of the things that's come up in contests is the matter of protests. If you've ever been in a contest where there's a protest, oh boy, that can get pretty exciting. Protests can only be lodged by contestants and judges. And they can only be lodged on the basis of eligibility and originality. So eligibility is something that the chief judge should be checking needs to check prior to the contest. We want to make sure all of our contestants are members in good standing as of that contest and belong to a club in good standing. That's typically not something that a judge is going to notice. But the other aspect of a protest is originality. And the content of any speech has to be at least 75% original. And it doesn't matter even if it's cited. If more than 25%, even if the source is cited, comes from some other source, that could be a basis for a protest. And there's a special procedure. What you'll do is if you believe, as you're judging, that a contestant has taken that material from somebody else and it constitutes more than 25% of the speech, you write the word protest on that bottom part of the ballot that you turn in. Go ahead and vote for your contestants. Go ahead and rank them first, second, third, but also write protest. And what will happen is the chief judge will open your ballot behind the scenes in another room, and we'll see protest, and then we'll call all the voting judges, not the tiebreaker judge, but all the voting judges into that back room, and they will then discuss the matter. The contestant has the opportunity to explain what happened, and I've seen it go both ways. I've seen contestants disqualified based on originality. I also saw just last year actually a protest where the majority of the judges felt that it was not a matter of originality, that the speech content was absolutely fine. And so there was no disqualification. And the contestant didn't even know that happened. It was all discussed behind the scenes. A majority of the judges said, nope, no issue, and that was that.
So Vicki, if I can clarify, if you as a judge have a concern, still vote as if there's no concern, but put the word protest on your ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's what I'd recommend.
Okay. We do have a couple of questions. First up is Kathy Hammond. Her question is what should you do if contest eligibility has not been verified prior to the contest?
Oh, well, that can be a problem. Now, the good news is that people in California are there until, I believe, 9 p.m. our time. So you can pick up the phone and call World Headquarters and tell them you have an emergency situation. You need to verify eligibility. That needs to be done before the contest begins. So you can do that on the spot at the contest. There's also, now I haven't tested this myself, but there's also an eligibility checker through Toastmasters.org. And so if you've got, you've got a Wi-Fi, if you're in wherever your venue is, you've got a Wi-Fi, you can log on to Toastmasters.org and check eligibility that way. Now the problem is, if somebody turns out, if it turns out that a contestant was actually not eligible on the day of that contestant is prohibited from continuing on, even if he corrects that eligibility situation. In other words, let's say the contest was yesterday and he hadn't paid his dues, he hadn't paid the April renewals, and but tomorrow he pays his dues, so he's current, doesn't matter. He can't continue because the day of that contest he wasn't eligible. Now this is going to be a much bigger issue come October 1st, because our dues, our renewals are due October 1st, and we have lots of division contests in District 10 in October. So that eligibility verification is going to be really, really important then.
Thank you, Vicki. Next up is from Craig Gerlach. If there is a dispute, is it the sole responsibility of the chief judge to determine the outcome?
Good question, Craig. No, what happens is the chief judge summons all the voting judges to a sequestered place, a back room usually. And the person who lodged the protest is typically the one called on to explain why he lodged the protest. And then what happens is there's discussion. The majority of the voting judges need to decide whether this is a legitimate grounds for disqualifying that contestant. It's not up to the chief judge to decide that. It is up to the voting judges. But the contestant has the right to come in and defend himself. Okay, so does that answer the question?
I'll have to wait for Craig to respond.
Okay.
Again, in the meantime, if you have your questions, feel free to pose them in chat or Q&A.
Yeah, so no, the chief judge is not the decision of the chief judge. The majority need to be in agreement, and then after the contestant explains why he did it that way, they may change their mind. They may decide, okay, this is really okay, and not disqualify him. But I have personally been at contests where I was judging, and the contestants were disqualified, and they were disqualified on the basis of originality.
Thanks, Vicki, and that did answer Craig's question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I hope that that all of you feel better prepared now to help out at a contest. Most of our club contests in District 10 are over. Not all of them. We still have a few more coming, and the area contests are getting underway. Our first area contest is in a couple of days. Is actually day after tomorrow, and got lots and lots of area contests. I urge you to attend contests throughout the district and in our neighboring districts if that's an option for you, and see how they're run and look at these, observe these very talented speakers. Anything else, Ace?
There are no last-minute questions here. As a reminder, we are recording this and hope to post this to the District 10 website soon. If you want a copy of the presentation slides, be sure to email it to Vicki, and her email address is programquality@district10.org. I've got a good question for you, Vicki, from Andre LeBlanc. A contestant isn't a native English speaker and can be difficult to understand. What kind of consideration is given? Is that similar to champion the underdog?
That's a very good question, Andre. Thanks. You know, if the contestant is not easy to understand, you do the best you can. If you really don't understand his speech, then how can you possibly rate him? For the international speech contest, the rulebook says the speeches must be made in English, and so at the club level, if clubs do various contests, then they can be in the local language. But, you know, when you're thinking about this, the international speech contest requirement is that the speeches be made in English. That means they have to be in understandable English. And, you know, our last several world champion of public speaking, well, or the champions were not from North America, or from their first language was not English, so they spoke with an accent, and they went all the way to #1 in the world, in the Toastmasters world. So having an accent is one thing. Not being able to be understood is something totally different. If you cannot understand that person, how can you? I would say, how could you rank him? How could you rank him favorably? Language is definitely a portion. It's worth less, but if that speaker's poor diction or mispronunciation gets in the way of your understanding the message, then yeah, you absolutely have to take that into consideration. And I wouldn't consider that an underdog situation.
Thank you, Vicki.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, the winner of this year's International Speech Contest, the world champion of public speaking, is a native of India who lives in Singapore. And last year's, oh my gosh, Darren Tay, where is he from? Was he from Korea? I'm not sure. He's from Asia. And we've had a lot of international winners who did not grow up in North America speaking American English. So it's really wonderful to see the international presence on our Toastmasters stage. And yeah, you may be a future world champion yourself.
Yeah, we've had a number of people from our district definitely make that world stage.
Yep, that's true. Well, Ace, if there are no further questions, I want to thank you and Tri-C for their generosity letting us use the WebEx service, and for your time, of course, Ace. It's been great. And thank our participants. And we will, if you have ideas for future educational seminars like this, webinars like this, please email me. I am looking for ideas.
Well, thank you, Vicki, and thank you, everybody.